In a public setting, I decided to propose to the man with whom I had been involved in an unclear relationship for 10 years. Instead of accepting, he dismissed the gesture by tossing the ring into his drink, treating it as a joke. Joseph stirred his beverage and hugged a young woman, casually telling me not to take it seriously. Little did he realize, that moment was my final chance. Later that evening, with red eyes, Joseph knelt on one knee, trembling as he retrieved the alcohol-soaked ring from his drink and asked me to marry him. "Don't be silly," he said. I gently closed the ring box and softly replied, I wasn't joking either. At 33, I had declared my intention to marry, and Kathy responded with confusion. Joseph agreed to marry me. I had intended to propose to him. Checking the time, I saw there were still 3 hours before the celebration party. "Good luck then," Kathy said, her voice filled with helplessness. I understood her skepticism, as tonight marked my second formal proposal to Joseph. After graduating from college, I abandoned further studies to start a business with him. In the early stages, we secured investments, built a team, and met our deadlines. We worked diligently for an entire year until our company began to gain recognition in the industry. On the night we received our first $1 million investment, we toasted on the company's rooftop. Slightly intoxicated, I listened as he envisioned the company's future. 5 years. No, 3 years, he corrected himself, pointing to a towering building across the street, declaring that our company would be based there. With the night breeze and the moon witnessing, his eyes sparkled with hope. My heart felt warm, and I casually removed the tab from a soda can. "Joseph, let's get married when we move into that building." He was momentarily stunned, then turned to take the makeshift ring from me and reached for my neck. Under the hot summer night, with cicadas singing and no breeze, on the cluttered rooftop, we shared our first kiss. In less than 3 years, we had moved into the most luxurious office building in the CBD. On the day of our relocation, which was also Joseph's birthday, I asked the assistant to take everyone out to dinner while I stayed behind to propose. By this time, Joseph had likely just finished an international conference call. The CEO's office featured an open layout with glass walls, complicating my plan. Holding sunflowers, I hid behind the door when a muffled noise caught my attention. Through the frosted glass, I saw 2 people entwined. A young, attractive secretary pressed against a man, fingers intertwined, whispering into each other's ears and sharing soft laughs, ending with a kiss. Feeling a chill, I leaned against the door, noticing how poorly soundproofed the office was. How long would they continue their kiss? At the celebratory dinner, I became inebriated and vaguely observed Joseph leading the blushing secretary late into the evening. She seemed to shyly hide behind him. Suddenly, my interest waned as Joseph, with a confident air, sat casually beside me. "Irene, didn't you prepare a surprise? Where's the gift?" His voice was full of expectation. If I had received the surprise he had prepared for me half an hour earlier, he might have stuck to his plan and presented the bouquet with the hidden diamond ring by now. I forgot, and lowered my head to drink, the atmosphere turning cold. The smile on Joseph's face faded, and he too began to drink more. As the banquet concluded, he mentioned that he had called a driver and insisted I go home first. Once inside the car, I regretted the decision. The vehicle was empty except for the sunflowers I had quietly discarded on the back seat. I heard the door lock behind me. "Irene, you've learned to deceive." His voice was hoarse, devoid of drunkenness. I curled up on one side of the car, filled with resistance. "Did you see it?" Joseph's deep voice continued. "Although I had the answer in my heart, you forced me to admit it. Let's return to being business partners. I wish you happiness." As I reached for the door to exit, my elbow was pulled back. "I'm sorry, it was just a moment of weakness." He sighed in frustration. "Can we?" His eyes, hidden in the darkness, shone brightly and enticingly, drawing me in. "Give me another chance." I couldn't believe his words after seeing him kiss someone else, so I simply said, "Let's discuss this later." The rest of his words were drowned in his warm embrace. I closed my eyes, smelling a strange perfume emanating from his collar, a bright, fruity floral scent that made me feel nauseous. I opened the car door from inside, telling him to leave. I turned away, not wanting to be swayed by his face. "Irene, They don't matter. I only want you." He picked up the bouquet of sunflowers, half kneeling in the cramped car, pleading with me. I lowered my gaze, looking into his clear eyes, feeling completely drained. "I don't want to see you right now. Please get out of the car." He stood silently, thrusting the sunflowers into my arms. "Go! Don't be angry." The carefully arranged sunflowers, which had endured from day to night, were now starting to wilt. Everything I had painstakingly prepared seemed like a joke. I didn't want to see them anymore, so I threw them back at Joseph. The ring flew out, and the diamond's sharp edges scratched his cheek, drawing blood. Surprisingly, Joseph seemed unaffected by the pain, picked up the ring amidst the sunflowers, and silently exited the car. "Call me when you get home." He clung to the car window, still hesitating, and then walked away without looking back. I rolled up the window and told the driver to depart. The following day, an extremely unequal profit-sharing agreement from Joseph lay quietly on my office desk. I signed it with a smile. Over the years, the company had grown rapidly, achieving a market valuation of up to $100 billion. Now, with his success and fame, recent media interviews and videos sparked conversations. The owner of this company is so handsome. He's a big shot now and only 33. Indeed, at just 33, achieving a $100 billion market valuation was remarkable. Nearly a decade had passed since my first proposal on the rooftop, and the second one that ended quietly. The old building with the rooftop had been replaced by a new structure. After that failed proposal, we never discussed marriage again, maintaining a relationship that was never official. I was aware of this preference, and he controlled my comfort zone. When our feelings were strong, he would ask, "What am I to you?" I would respond, "What do you think?" He smiled, didn't answer, and just held me tightly. We were like two dependent creatures, healing our wounds in the business battlefield and sharing our successes. We would kiss by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hold each other after signing major contracts, and exchange wishes at New Year's dawn. Our relationship only extended so far. Over the years, Joseph always publicly portrayed himself as single, seemingly interested in others to avoid the market's colorful temptations. Everyone in the company knew that the two bosses were ambiguously connected. Every year, new individuals pursued him, seeking his attention. Initially, I thought they were simply unaware, until one day at the water cooler, I overheard Irene and Joseph talking. "I don't think they have a chance," a crisp female voice replied kindly to her colleague's caution. If they were serious, they wouldn't have waited so many years. Besides, I'm only 24. What's there to fear? It's not like I can't handle it. At 24, nearly a decade younger than me, I held the coffee cup, feeling the bitterness before taking a sip. That night was a celebration for the company's new product sales exceeding 10 million, and I invited all our mutual friends and partners. As evening approached, I grew increasingly nervous, reviewing the plans repeatedly. With my assistant on maternity leave, HR provided a young, handsome man named John to assist me temporarily. Normally composed, he saw my anxiety for the first time and couldn't help but comment, "Irene, you're amazing. No one would turn you down." Sighing, I replied, "It's not my first proposal." John fell silent for a moment, then added, "If he's blind or you're blind, let's change it up." His straightforwardness eased my tension. That night, Joseph appeared in a high-end suit, exuding confidence as he interacted with the guests. At 33, he was handsome and mature, with charming eyes. People came and went around him constantly. I held a glass of wine, locking eyes with him from a distance. He frowned slightly at my red dress, remembering his advice to avoid flashy attire in business settings. Tonight was different. I hoped he would remember me differently, not just as a business partner. As the evening progressed, the event reached its peak with everyone raising their glasses to toast the record-breaking sales of the new product. At my signal, the host began the next segment, a 60-second moment of heartfelt sincerity. With a theatrical countdown, the lights dimmed, and everyone was encouraged to hold hands or even kiss their loved ones. The audience buzzed with excitement. The company had a rule against open office relationships. You could date but not make it public. Many were in secret romances, afraid of being caught. This night felt like breaking that rule. Standing off stage, I focused on Joseph's position. He was by the window talking to a friend. When he noticed my gaze, he raised his glass in acknowledgement. Everything was set. I embarked on the longest 60 seconds of my life, walking towards Joseph from the stage. What felt like 10 steps symbolized 10 years, from 23 to 33, from the first promise to the failed attempts. This was my last chance, my desired resolution. Last week, my aunt had messaged me, hinting that Joseph was getting serious with another girl, and even asked if good news was on the horizon. After a decade of dancing around each other, my aunt already regarded me as her daughter. The moment was approaching. In the darkness, I smelled a familiar woody scent. Taking out the prepared ring, a simple band I had crafted, engraved with symbols of our past, I raised it towards the direction I believed he stood and nervously whispered, "Joseph, let's get married." As the lights came on, I smiled, ready for his enthusiastic response, but the scene before me drained the colors from the world. Moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating a couple passionately kissing inside. The man gently held the woman's head, kissing her even as the lights brightened. She blushed, unsure where to place her hands. Above them, drones performed an elaborate yet overlooked proposal in the night sky. Wait, did she manage to win over the boss? That new girl! Look, the drone's pattern resembles a ring, doesn't it? I felt a cold shiver run through me. My hand was held out stiffly like wood, unable to retract. The man finally noticed my presence, released the woman, and smirked, asking, "What's the matter?" His lips were faintly stained with lipstick. I stiffened my neck, focusing all my strength and ignoring the soft fragrance around me, glaring directly into his eyes. "Are you serious?" The tension in my mind was like a tightly wound string on the verge of snapping. Joseph glanced at the object in my hand, picked it up, and threw the silver band into his glass, watching it sink quickly. "A dare? This joke has gone too far," he said. He swirled his drink, held onto the girl in his arms, and casually said, "Irene, don't make a scene." The decade-long tension finally broke. Gossip and whispers filled the space. The host and an experienced wedding MC tried to regain the audience's attention, but it was futile. I lowered my head, feeling numb. Even though I stood on soft carpet, it felt like stepping on a knife's edge. I knew exactly what it meant when he didn't mention marriage, yet I insisted on seeking an answer, willing to fight until someone was bleeding just for closure. Reluctantly, he admitted, "I truly fit someone's description. A stubborn fool." Because of my stubbornness during school, I had to top my class, silencing the guy who always teased me for being second. Due to my stubbornness, I stuck with Joseph in starting a business, never regretting it, no matter how tough things got. Because of my stubbornness, I pretended to be like him, carefree and indifferent, thinking that after all the twists and turns, we would end up together. Now, what's the difference between me now and the secretary he heartlessly left years ago? I took the ring from my hand and handed it to his sister in his embrace. "Here, take it." The girl blushed, looking unsure, and glanced timidly at the man behind her. "Irene, what do you mean?" Joseph's eyes darkened. "Useless things that don't belong together should be thrown away." I casually tossed the girl's ring into his glass. The couple's rings reunited in the cup and sank together. "I don't want it. You can stay with him." As soon as the car started moving, Joseph began calling frantically. In the past, whenever he called and I wasn't in a meeting, I would always pick up within 3 rings. Now, even if it rang until it hung up on its own, I chose to ignore it. Siri announced his messages. "Irene, where are you? They said you were going to prank me tonight. I'm sorry about everything." The phone kept ringing persistently. "Failed in love, now talk business. We are business partners. Blacklisting each other is unnecessary." I let Siri answer and directly said, "I don't think there's a need for further discussion." Silence filled the other end. A low, amused chuckle echoed in the car. "You're already in a rush to reject me even before I speak." The rich voice carried a hint of mockery. I stopped the car immediately and checked the incoming call. It was an overseas number. It could only be him. "Sorry, Eric, I thought." "It seems your marriage proposal didn't go smoothly. It failed," I admitted calmly, not minding that it was Eric, my former art rival. "I'm sorry to hear that." There was no consolation in his voice, just a touch of sarcasm. interested in switching sides and coming to my company? I firmly declined, knowing he had ulterior motives. Turning the car around, I realized my e-cigarette was missing. Irritably, I rolled down the window, letting the night breeze in. Making money the same way? Why not choose a more comfortable boss? The man tempted me. I am a partner. Mature business people never resist opportunities. After spending the night sorting out property documents, I returned to the company early in the morning with the relevant files. From the lobby security guards to the receptionist in the CEO's office, everyone's gaze was either probing or sympathetic. It seemed my actions the previous night had spread throughout the entire conglomerate. The blackish-purple door before me was cold and luxurious, which I had personally ordered at the start. How many times had I pushed open this door with anticipation, only to leave disappointed? The door suddenly swung open before I could react, and I was pulled inside. The room was dim, with floor-to-ceiling windows covered by curtains. A strong smell of alcohol filled the space. It was a mess everywhere. "Where were you last night?" The man, still in yesterday's clothes with disheveled hair and slightly purple eyes, looked terrifying. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" He grabbed my shoulders, buried his face in my neck, and tried to find a place with his burning lips. The envelope of my resignation letter blocked his advances. "Let's break up." I met his bewildered eyes calmly. "Just because I kissed someone else yesterday?" The man became flustered, crumpling my envelope and clutching my wrist tightly. "I'm sorry, it was just with her." "Just what?" I interrupted his office ranting. "Just a performance? Or like a few years ago, just a moment of impulse?" "You clearly know that was my limit. A few years ago, you crossed a line that I could never forgive. Now, the same thing is happening again. I don't want to keep playing the role of incomplete lovers with you." She said she liked me so passionately, like a ball of fire. The thrill of the first encounter is such a charming temptation. The hard part is maintaining contentment for the long haul. Last night, you could drop the ring. Today you can drop him. Pushing his hand away, I felt exhausted. "Joseph, let's just call it quits." He suddenly turned around, opened a drawer abruptly, and took out a dark red notebook. "Isn't it about getting married? Let's go now." My palms went numb, realizing the situation. The slap had already landed. "Can you?" I gritted my teeth, trying hard to hold back tears, not wanting my 10 years to be ruined. Opening the door, the eavesdropper crouching by the entrance suddenly fell down. "Stop eavesdropping." "Do you still want to have some afternoon tea?" I signaled to my assistant John to buy everyone some tea, while instructing to clean up and bring a paper box. Upon hearing this, he was dumbfounded. "Sis, are you leaving?" "Let's keep it quiet for now." Although I am leaving, the company is also my hard work, and I don't want people to worry about top management issues. "Can you take me with you? Joseph is a good boss and won't mistreat you guys." I patted his shoulder. "I have plans to start my own business, but I don't want others to give up good benefits and take risks with me." Looking back at the dimly lit office, I turned and left the position I had held for 10 years. A flashy sports car was parked downstairs. Even in the elite CBD, the car's flame-like body still drew attention. I wasn't in the mood to appreciate it, so I walked past it, and the doors behind me suddenly opened. A tall man with long legs stepped out of the car. Eric, who had been in England last night, appeared now, looking quite pleased with himself. He picked up an exaggerated bunch of yellow roses from the back seat and placed them in my arms. Behind his shoulder, I saw Joseph approaching, abruptly stopping, his eyes dark with worry. Childish or not, I couldn't be bothered dealing with Eric, who had come specifically to make things difficult for Joseph, and decided to return the flowers. A tall figure rushed in front of me, keeping Eric at bay. I recognized him, someone with such poor taste. Joseph glanced at the flamboyant sports car, his tone unfriendly. "Eric, how have you been? When did you come back?" Eric smiled and said, "Long time no see? Probably when you sealed the deal with the pretty little sister?" They exchanged polite words, but their eyes were fierce, as if they might bite each other the next second. Eric was my arch enemy from high school. He always effortlessly claimed the top spot in class and deliberately approached me to find my weaknesses. He made me cry several times in anger, forcing me to study hard in secret, doubling my efforts. Eventually, I defeated him in one exam, but just that once. When I entered university, this guy suddenly changed his heart and started pursuing me. At that time, I had just met Joseph, and my eyes were full of that person with a sparkle in his eye. Eric said I was blind. I said he was jealous. He was so angry that he decided to go abroad, dismissing my confession as a fleeting fancy with no follow-up. However, every year on my birthday, I received a gift from Eric. At 24, Joseph gave me a bouquet of roses, while Eric had a flower truck deliver flowers. At 26, Joseph prepared a lavish meal, while Eric invited a Michelin chef to cook at the party venue. At 28, Joseph allocated 60% of the company's profits to me, while Eric's lawyer presented documents saying that signing would make me the owner of a company that made money effortlessly. Even though I didn't accept it, Joseph was still very upset. "You resigned because of him?" The man standing before me sounded hoarse, his fists clenched. I sighed. "Is it because of him?" "Don't you know? If it weren't for Eric, we would have split up years ago. It's been years since we met, and you're still so childish." Leaning against the car, Eric casually lit a cigarette, raising his eyelids as if to say, "See, there's someone more childish than me." "I still have things to discuss with Irene," I said. "Eric, please go back." Joseph tried to control his anger, turning to drag me away. Eric took a step with his long legs, blocking him. "There should be a first-come, first-served order, Joseph." The two confronted each other on the street, tension rising and attracting many people from the office building to watch. "You guys take your time to chat. I'll go first." With that, Eric lifted the roses in his hand and said, "I'll take the flowers, and I already have the car." He stepped into my black Mercedes with long strides. The sports car had a low chassis, and I was not accustomed to the seating. Kathy heard that Joseph and I had broken up and was so happy she exclaimed, "Ada, clock tonight. I'll take you out for something nice." "Certainly. Here's a rewritten version of your text, maintaining the original meaning while altering the structure and wording." She questioned, "Where is your combat attire?" Had I understood her implications, I might not have agreed to attend. In earlier times, Joseph disapproved of me wearing dresses, especially those with a touch of flamboyance. During our initial years, we conducted business over wine, and there were always some deceitful glances directed at the women present. Once, an investor placed his slick hand on my shoulder in front of Joseph, requesting that he offer me to him. Without hesitation, Joseph assaulted the man, resulting in his hospitalization. Predictably, our business began to decline. At the police station, Joseph suddenly lashed out, forbidding me from dressing that way again. "Am I so incompetent that you need to sell your appearance for me?" I stared at him in shock before finally letting out a sigh. From that moment on, I never wore a dress again, except for one in my closet gifted by Kathy on my birthday. Gazing at myself in the mirror, I felt somewhat out of place. The black fishtail skirt accentuated my slender waist. A few strands of hair were casually lifted. My red lips were slightly parted, and my complexion was as cold as ice. At 33, I began donning elegant dresses once more. Kathy arranged for me to visit the largest nightclub in town. As we stepped out of the car, a handsome waiter guided us inside, where flickering lights created an enchanting atmosphere. Upon entering the private room, the music enveloped us as Kathy and some friends joyously sang along. Taking my seat, Kathy grabbed the microphone and loudly declared, "Tonight is the night my sister frees herself from hardship and returns to the wild. We won't leave until we're intoxicated." She snapped her fingers toward the entrance. I poured myself a drink and looked up to witness an unforgettable sight. Several tall, well-dressed, attractive men entered in a single file, followed by 4 or 5 stunning women. "What's happening here?" I wondered. Kathy boldly announced, "Greetings on behalf of your sister." The men turned to face me simultaneously, perfectly aligned. I promptly stood up, pulled Kathy aside, and whispered, "How long has this been happening?" Proudly, she replied, "About 2 or 3 years." Taking a deep breath, thoughts of legal troubles and potential imprisonment flashed through my mind, reflecting my successful business background. Yes, indeed. Over the past few years, their good looks ensured they had no issues with food and clothing. However, business has been struggling lately, forcing them to seek alternative paths. Now that you're going solo, why not mentor them? I was taken aback, staring at her in disbelief and beginning to sweat. "You all can leave first. I responded coldly, ushering the handsome men and beauties out. Then I'll embrace Kathy tightly and accompany her to turn herself in. You can't continue like this anymore. Kathy was stunned, covering her mouth and laughing as she collapsed onto the sofa. Sister, this is a legitimate modeling agency. The market has been tough lately. These are all talented individuals. Why not sign them as your first batch of artists? I was speechless. Do you still remember our high school dreams? That summer when Keta sang and we both dreamed of a carefree and happy future. Over the years, I had dedicated myself to the company Joseph and I founded, focusing on product and technology development while I handled external marketing channels, complementing each other harmoniously. No one knew I wasn't passionate about digital products or understood development. Every new product launch saw me force myself to study extensive manuals, meticulously noting technical details and consulting the tech team on anything unclear. Now, separated from Joseph, I no longer had to endure those books. I held Kathy tightly, tears welling in my eyes. She stroked my hair and said, "You're only 33. You have plenty of time. Whatever path you choose, I support you. Why am I pushing you toward a pre-packaged marriage like a game? My world can be an open game." Handsome men and beautiful women entered the private room again, each greeting me nervously. I invited them to sit, opened a bottle of wine, and began conversing about their experiences to get to know them better. After a couple of drinks, the reserved young men began to loosen up. "Sister, how do you maintain yourself? You seem the same age as us." "What are you talking about? Sister naturally has good looks. No maintenance needed." Laughter filled the room. Seeing those vibrant faces reminded me of myself a decade ago, full of future enthusiasm, just like them. When did my life become solely about work, socializing, and the firm steps with Joseph that I thought were certain but were actually diverging? Late at night, those skilled in singing took turns performing. I was immersed in the music, pouring myself a full glass. After finishing, I poured another. "After tonight, you need to move forward," someone said. Feeling dizzy, I leaned back on the sofa, drunk. The sofa gave way next to me, and someone sat beside me, covering the mouth of my glass. "Don't drink anymore." The voice was cold, with a hint of anger. I followed the slender, pale hand up in the dim light to see a sharply featured face emerge. "Why are there two Erics?" I touched one of their faces. Laughing, he said, "This one is real. Come on, have a drink with me." He gripped my wrist, and a thought struck me from above. "Irene, who am I?" I tilted my head back, thoughts muddled, then squinted. This nose, those eyes, that mouth, handsomely mature. I wasn't wrong, it's Eric. "Did you lose your memory? For God's sake, who are you?" I pointed to his nose, bursting into laughter. "Hurry up and cry, no one here will see it." As I laughed, he responded, "I'm not human, remember?" in a tone both resigned and bitter. "Then why would I cry?" I replied with a smile. Eric poured himself a full glass. "Okay, I'll drink with you." It was my turn to cover his glass. There was a question that needed to be answered first. "Eric, what do you like about me? Why have you persisted for so long?" If it was just spite, Joseph wouldn't have immediately flown back from the UK upon hearing about my failed marriage proposal, nor would he have returned every year to give me a birthday gift without fail for 10 years. Eric chuckled softly. "Well, what about you?" His voice carried helplessness and bitterness as he asked, "Why?" I remembered when we first started the business with Joseph, facing all life's ups and downs. That night, after dealing with an investor, 3 months of product planning and samples were ruined, and the backups were wiped clean. We didn't even know who was responsible, and we were so poor we couldn't afford surveillance cameras. Although I could reconstruct everything from memory, there was no time. Eventually, I used a demo automatically synced to the cloud, apologized to the investor while emphasizing our product's key points. Though we didn't secure the investment, we left a strong impression. A year later, we regrouped and improved our product, knocking on the investor's door again. After successfully obtaining a large investment, we planned to celebrate by dining at the investor's company building. We declined 2 restaurants, both deemed too expensive. Every penny was hard-earned and had to be spent wisely. In the end, we ordered 2 sets of Odin from a convenience store. Joseph added all the meat from his bowl to mine, drank a large bowl of soup, and said he was full. Later, when we had the money, we could afford the city's best restaurant, but we never had a proper meal together again. "Eric, I want to eat Odin," I said. He was silent for a moment, then set down his glass of wine and agreed. Before leaving, I went to the restroom and was confronted by a drunkard, his irritated expression giving me a splitting headache as he began to get physical. My temper flared and I forcefully pushed him away. The drunkard, previously acting tough, sobered slightly after being shoved to the ground and jumped up, roaring in anger and accusing me of being self-righteous, even raising his arm. Just as he was about to act, a familiar figure intervened, separating us while enveloping me with a recognizable scent. Joseph and his friends happened to pass by and witness the scene. His friend dragged the drunkard away while Joseph stayed behind, silently observing me. "Why are you so drunk?" He frowned deeply, his affectionate eyes reflecting my disheveled state. I shrugged off his helping hand and said, "Thanks," before parting ways. Joseph grabbed my elbow, stopping me from leaving. A clear voice spoke, "Sister, do you need help?" A handsome young man rushed out of the restroom, resembling one of the people Kathy had brought earlier. I waved him off. "I'll wait for you in the private room." "Sister," he smiled and winked at me. The man behind me darkened his face, his knuckles cracking as he was about to speak. "Sister?" "I've been looking for you." Another attractive man passed by, trying to pull me back to the private room. Joseph couldn't take it anymore. "Get lost," he growled, chasing the man away. Turning back, he grabbed my shoulder, grinding his teeth, and said, "Irene, what are you doing?" I looked at the face I once loved without any hesitation. "It's none of your business." "Boss, there you are, making it hard for me to find you." An adorable girl threw herself at me. "Didn't we agree not to leave until we're drunk tonight?" Her soft body pressed against mine, forcefully pushing Joseph aside. "How can you leave on your own?" Joseph, on the verge of losing his composure, ignored everyone, pushed the girl away, grabbed my arm and walked with me. Busy with work, Eric stepped out from the corner calmly. "If my memory serves, Irene is no longer your employee, right?" The word employee carried a heavy implication. Joseph's face drained of color, releasing his tension and forcing a smile. "So this is how you felt back then." He wiped his face, his handsome features weary and dull. "Remember to come to my mom's birthday next month, Joseph?" "I won't come. It's up to you." Joseph turned away dejectedly, saying, "She told me yesterday that she misses you." As they walked away, Eric asked, "Are we still going for Odin?" "Let's go. What's stopping us?" Soon after, Joseph's lawyer came to discuss matters. Although the division of company assets was complex, it was handled properly. Once the formalities were complete, I received a substantial amount of money, enough to boast about when I saw the zeros in my bank account. I suddenly felt like laughing. This was everything I had traded 10 years for. With the funds and staff in place, the next step was to make connections in the entertainment industry. Through Kathy's introduction, I had the chance to meet Mary, a well-connected senior figure in the field. Before meeting the influential person, I needed to prepare a thoughtful gift. After learning about their interest in antique book collecting, I discovered an upcoming auction where many collectors and affluent individuals would display their treasures, including a set of understated antique books. That night, armed with the invitation Kathy had arranged for me, I attended the auction. The banquet hall was elegantly lit, filled with chatter and clinking glasses. After greeting some familiar business partners, I sat in a corner, waiting for the auction to begin. Suddenly, a disturbance at the entrance caught my attention. A man in a tailored black suit entered the crowd and approached the organizer, exchanging pleasantries. As the company's tax payments rose each year, Joseph's name became more prominent in high society circles. Young, wealthy, unmarried. The epitome of what the elite admired, his rags-to-riches story, capability, good looks, and charisma. Young socialites blushed and glanced towards the door. "Isn't he the one on the magazine cover 2 weeks ago?" "Yes, but he seems to have brought a female companion." "That's his sister, but even though he's so handsome at 33, he still isn't single. Bringing his sister instead of a girlfriend to such an event? Perhaps he's going through a relationship transition." Sitting in the corner, I looked up slightly. The young girl beside him was in her early 20s, dressed cutely and attractively. She was Helen, Joseph's sister, 10 years younger than him. Joseph doted on her excessively, ensuring she lacked nothing, even during our financial hardships. When Helen was being bullied during her early days studying abroad, She was too frightened to tell her brother and called me in the middle of the night. I rushed over to help her discreetly. A phrase she might recognize from me. I shrunk my shoulders. She was still captivated by a glance. "Sister?" She glanced at her brother, looking like a pitiful little one who wanted to approach but didn't dare. The crowd was silenced by her loud voice, and everyone turned to look. I nodded awkwardly. Joseph remained silent, his expression growing more displeased. Helen wanted to sit at my table, but was stared at by her brother, so she obediently sat down, looking aggrieved, swirling the tablecloth. Although separated from Joseph, I still cared deeply for Helen. Most people come here to socialize, and likely not many have as clear objectives as mine. Shooting would be a problem. The socialites around me continued their hushed conversations. It seems he's been looking over here. Is he looking at me? Maybe I'm overthinking it. If he wanted to look, he would be staring directly at me. I almost made eye contact just now. This blind date option arranged by my father is much better than before. I only cared about the items up for auction. Everything unrelated was irrelevant to me. Sensing a sharp gaze that seemed to follow me everywhere, my budget was tight, but I had prepared thoroughly. The only variable was when I slightly raised my eyes and glanced past the stern profile in front of me. After several rounds, everyone noticed the tension between me and him, and discussions buzzed around. I sighed and stopped raising the paddle. Helen, who had been sitting beside me, couldn't bear it and pressed her brother's paddle down. It was only then that I managed to win a few small items, including a pair of men's cufflinks. After the auction, Joseph stopped me at the door. "The items you bid on will be delivered to your residence later." I was momentarily stunned, then smiled and said, "Joseph, no pain, no gain. Whatever I want, I'll fight for it myself. If I can't obtain it, it's just me overreaching." These words were innocent, but held a different meaning for Joseph. He placed his hand on my ear. "I just want one thing from you. That pair of men's cufflinks?" So, that was what he cared about. "I'm sorry, but the item already belongs to someone else." Joseph seemed as if he had been struck hard, remaining silent for a long time. He lowered his proud head and said, "Horse Irene, I was wrong. Please give me another chance." "Irene, all the things you want are here." I pushed Joseph aside and nodded to the person behind me. Joseph immediately understood, laughing as his whole body trembled. "So it's not these things you wanted. I really underestimated you, Irene." I thanked Joseph for his praise. I knew Joseph too well. The more he refused to back down, the more he would compete during the auction. I didn't want to waste any unnecessary money, so I contacted Kathy, who immediately arranged for a male model to bid for me. I placed bids on several small items to make Joseph think I was leaving disappointed. Meanwhile, the items I truly wanted had already been purchased by the male model at a low price. "Irene, I feel like..." His eyes filled with sadness. "I have never really understood you. I've always been like this. It's just that in the past, I only used these means on others." Eric happily received my gift, preparing to pounce on me, which startled me and made me retreat. He unwrapped a sapphire cufflink worth several times what I had spent and put on the one I gave him. "This is the first gift you've given me. I will cherish it." His words were sincere and full of heartfelt emotion. Surprisingly, even though I had known Eric for so long, I had never given him a proper gift. 10 years ago, he never prepared a birthday gift for me and carried rare book collectibles to visit Mary, inviting me to join them. "Take me with you, and I'll be your secretary." He bypassed the company's general manager to come to my small company daily to assist, even wanting to be my secretary. When he met Mary, I understood why he was so insistent. The rare books were just an icebreaker. What truly made her willing to sit and listen to my proposal was seeing Eric. "How's your mother doing?" "She's doing great. She left on another trip last month." Eric's mother and Mary were old friends, which is why Mary looked at Eric with eyes as if seeing her own child. Throughout the visit, Eric remained silent, entirely handing over the stage to me. Mary and I hid it, almost forgetting Eric was sitting beside us. Mary joyfully asked, "Eric is at the age to settle down, isn't he?" "Sister, you're kidding. I'm still chasing after girls." As he spoke, he began to get up to leave. From where I sat, I could see Eric's ears turning red. After the visit, I reflected in Eric's car. The company hadn't fully taken off yet, and I already owed many favors. Could I really make it? If I failed, would those who trusted me be disappointed? Eric opened the convertible top of the sports car. It was drizzling during the rainy season, and we were suddenly caught in a downpour. "Eric, what are you doing?" I raised my hand in panic to shield myself from the rain, inadvertently shielding him as well. "Irene, when did you start hesitating so much?" I blinked and looked at him in the wind and rain, feeling warmth spreading in my heart. Where did that person who tore up my report card and challenged me go? The one who was fearless and didn't care about anything. Why did I lose that person? I feared losing, afraid of being underestimated by Joseph, afraid of being laughed at by young people, afraid of others' judgments. But so what? Acknowledging the fear of loss doesn't mean I can't afford to lose. Through Mary's introduction, I successfully secured the IP rights to a small but well-received project, and even got a spot in a renowned director's schedule. All that was left was finding a lead actor to carry the project. I had someone in mind, but no one knew that the famous actress Anna and I had once been dorm roommates. I slept opposite her, watching her attend reports day after day, looking increasingly worn, and my heart ached for her. I compiled a list of non-spicy restaurants near the school and placed it on her desk. Later, she developed a tolerance for spicy food, and we became close friends, sharing a bed. It wasn't until I gave up attending a better school with her because of Joseph that she was deeply disappointed. Anna always disliked Joseph, saying he had a face that easily revealed others' secrets. I hoped she could set aside her bias against him for my sake. This made her so angry that she even refused to take a graduation photo with me, saying, "Irene, you will regret this." For 10 years, I had only seen her at major media events and on stage receiving awards. Now, at 33, Anna was firmly in the top tier. When I received the script, the first person I thought of was her. No one was more suitable. The contact information I obtained led to a phone call with her assistant, who said Anna was willing to meet me. Nervously, I knocked on the door. As soon as it opened, a stunningly beautiful woman with red eyes looked at me. Time had passed, and she was no longer the young girl who would stick her tongue out when eating spicy food. "If I don't contact you for a day, do you just not see me?" Anna, with red eyes, grabbed a cushion worth thousands and threw it at me. Memories of our pillow fights in college came flooding back. "Are you a pig? Can't you even dodge?" The famous actress, known for her icy beauty, was now before me, throwing a tantrum like a child. I dropped my handbag and embraced her. "Anna, you're right. It was my fault." A wave of warmth and moisture enveloped my shoulders. That night, we cuddled on a bed, gossiping and sharing our hearts just as intimately as we did 10 years ago. When Anna heard about my failed marriage proposal, she was so angry she sat up in bed, demanding to expose the scumbag. I quickly held her back. "It's all in the past. You're just letting him off like that?" Anna was indignant. "I just want to let myself go." Anna wanted to act for free, but I insisted otherwise. "If you don't want to earn my money, can you make up the shortfall for your company yourself?" After some persuasion, she finally agreed to let me pay part of the fee to her company. It took another month to visit each one, confirming the schedules of the director and all the lead actors. All available funds were invested in pre-production planning, and once again, I felt the lack of money. Every time Eric tried to speak up, I dodged his inquiries. Anyone else's money could be borrowed, just not his, because he couldn't pay it back. A week before filming began, I visited the author with the adapted script. The author, a newcomer, was very excited to see me. I had recognized the potential in his work before it became popular and bought the entire series of film and television rights. He was grateful, continually thanking me, and I told him that better days were ahead. 3 days before shooting started, the chief director suddenly requested to meet me. Feeling slightly uneasy, I flew to meet him overnight. He immediately criticized me and unexpectedly proposed adding a new character at the last minute. "No, the script is already finalized with the author and cannot be altered," I responded firmly. "Irene, could you please discuss this again with the original writer?" he suggested. "He's open to taking on a minor role without compensation." Flipping through the pages, I replied coldly, "With nearly 100 scenes and numerous interactions opposite the lead, how is that considered a minor part? The original material didn't even have a prototype. It was customized for a newcomer. When the director realized I wouldn't budge, he became exasperated. If you disagree, I won't proceed with the shoot. I respect your talent and decisions. Mary recommended you, but this is my company's first production, and I won't let anyone compromise its quality. After we couldn't reach an agreement, he asked me to reconsider and then left. Immediately after his departure, I contacted industry friends to compile a list of potential directors. Late that night, Kathy called with bad news. "It can't get any worse," I responded. The fans of the original authors were once again criticizing us online. I hadn't anticipated how dire things could become. The loyal fans launched lengthy tirades against me, accusing me of betraying the author by promising to honor the script but then allowing significant changes. They highlighted specific pages filled with alterations, questioning when I had ever asked someone to contact the author. Within hours, fueled by online sentiments, the fans were furious, seeking out my personal information. Other fans, previously affected by malicious adaptations, joined in, condemning me and urging a boycott of anything related to my company. Faced with such coordinated and intentional attacks, I could think of only one possibility. I grabbed the phone and called. "Was it you who approached the author and blamed me?" The line was noisy with clinking glass, and an impatient man responded, "If you're not willing to talk to the author, I will. Don't forget, we're in this together. Do you really want to burn bridges?" I was so enraged, I almost crushed the phone. "I can't believe a resource celebrity could make you do this. Don't you think I want to shoot well? But you offended someone, and now they're deliberately trying to upset you? I can't do anything about it. Do you know Joseph?" My mind went blank as I listened. The bright lights outside tall buildings shone, but none awaited me. After an uncertain time, I dialed a number from my blacklist. The call was promptly answered as if someone had been expecting it. "Irene, come back. Whatever you choose to do, start a company or get married, I'll support you. Something I once longed for is now within reach," Joseph said, but I didn't want any of it. "Joseph, you're just a fool." I hung up and removed the SIM card. First, I need to scold him. Even if all my efforts and years of savings are wiped out overnight, I won't bow to him. At 3 a.m, a gentle breeze by the river prompted me to remove my high heels and stand barefoot, feeling the cool air on my face. The beer I bought from the convenience store gradually emptied as my mind cleared unusually. Gazing at the large sign across the river, I exclaimed, "Joseph, are you a fool? I must have been blind to fall for you," and rushed to the river's edge. Stepping onto a nearby stone bench, I shouted at the building across, "Irene, don't be foolish in your next life." As I closed my eyes, the picturesque river view vanished, and a warmth surrounded my waist. An irresistible force lifted me, held me firmly, and placed me back on the ground. Startled, I turned to see Eric, his face wet with tears. He was my rival of over a decade, a man who wouldn't shed a tear even when injured. He held me tightly, trembling all over, slowly closing his eyes. His voice was hoarse and sorrowful. "Irene, don't be foolish. Even if you're bankrupt tomorrow, I can help you recover. If you're short on people, I don't need the company now. I'll help you with chores. Whatever you lack, I can provide. Please don't do anything reckless." With his head resting on my shoulder and tears wetting my skin, I felt both amused and heartbroken. Gently patting his back, I softly asked, "Who are you to me? Doing all this for me?" He lifted his head, his eyes serious. "Even if you don't feel it now, I'm willing." Eric fixed his hair, adjusting the towel by the river. "When did you become so humble? Just now you suddenly charged up, stepped on the bench, and closed your eyes. In that moment, I regretted waiting for you to turn around like a fool, regretted not confessing my feelings properly, and regretted not taking you directly 10 years ago because of my stubborn pride." I stared at him blankly at his straightforward and intense confession. Realizing one day it would be directed at me, I stood up, embraced his neck, and choked, "Fool. I'm the fool." Eric carried me on his back down the street. I scolded the director for his lack of loyalty, Joseph for his deceitfulness, and the fans for their irrationality, hearing him agree kindly. "Yes, you're right." After venting, I fell asleep on his back. The next morning, I woke up on an unfamiliar bed with clean, warm sheets. Stretching lazily, I noticed a furry head resting at the edge of the bed. Sunlight streamed in, dancing on his long eyelashes. His lips were surprisingly attractive and sharp-tongued as usual. I had never noticed this side of Eric before. Gently waking him, his eyes opened slowly. He subconsciously touched the blanket to ensure his position before rubbing his arm, which had been my pillow all night. Seeing me staring at him, Eric awkwardly scratched his head. "You were really drunk last night. Afraid you might choke on your vomit. You stayed up the entire night, not just worried about me choking, but also if I might have second thoughts in the middle of the night." He began to stand, preparing to leave. His body moved faster than his mind, and I threw myself onto his strong back, grabbing his waist firmly and resting my chin on his shoulder. "Eric, don't you want to acknowledge what you said yesterday?" The man in my arms felt like a heavy object, his hand on my back, his voice still thick. I leaned towards his face, whispered, "Shall we check?" and gently brushed his ear with my lips. Eric suddenly turned around, a fierce intensity in his eyes. I released his hand and backed away, but it was too late. He easily lifted me up, and I lost my balance, quickly holding onto his neck as he placed me by the window. He pressed a button, pulling the curtains closed, and the room plunged into darkness. When I regained consciousness, the curtains had been drawn back, and the room was still dim. Realizing a full day of turmoil had passed, my stomach growled with hunger, and I kicked the man beside me in annoyance. "I'm hungry," I said. He slightly lifted his eyelids, showing a satisfied smile. "If it weren't for my exhaustion, I would have kicked you off the bed." "Don't be angry. What do you want to eat?" "I'll make something," he replied, holding my ankle and tucking me back under the covers. After freshening up, I sneaked into the kitchen and watched Eric put on a black apron, using his phone for recipes as he cooked with a bowed head. I walked slowly behind him, embracing his waist. "Anything will do. I'm really hungry." He stopped, broke my embrace, and pushed me out of the kitchen. "If you want to eat, don't bother me." Suddenly remembering something, he glanced meaningfully at the clean stove. "Kitchens can be dangerous. It's better if you stay out." He gave me a meaningful look before leaving. Realizing his intentions, I almost dashed out of his house. After finally eating, Eric asked about the online issues and if he could help. I declined, wanting to handle it myself. Joseph had planned for me to attend his mother's birthday banquet 2 days later, whether out of gratitude for his aunt's past care or due to public pressure. I wouldn't miss it, and I unexpectedly brought Eric along. My aunt's eyes lit up upon seeing me and left her sister to join us. The elegant and composed woman, upon noticing Eric by my side, couldn't hide her displeasure. "Irene, who is this?" Auntie asked. "My boyfriend, Eric," I replied. "Auntie wants to speak with you privately." Eric nodded, giving us some space. "Over the years, I've seen you and Joseph grow close without love, just affection. Why does it now seem like you're on bad terms for life?" She held my hand, her face filled with sorrow. "Auntie, we're not compatible." "What's not compatible?" "I think you two are perfect for each other. It's just that he doesn't know how to cherish you, and now you're running off with someone else. He just drinks at home all day. Does that help?" "It's indeed useless," I responded lightly. Despite blaming her son, she actually wanted to defend his case. "I came not only to celebrate your birthday and thank you for your years of care, but also to seek an explanation from Joseph." A commotion at the door signaled the arrival of Joseph, who had not shown up earlier, now accompanied by a female friend. I recognized her immediately, Celine, the newcomer, forcibly included. Joseph led Celine to us. Their eyes met mine briefly before quickly looking away. No one expected what happened next. Auntie found it unacceptable for her son to bring another woman to the family banquet. Feeling slapped in the face, she stepped forward, raised her hand, and slapped Joseph hard in the face. Everyone turned to watch as the banquet grew silent. Celine, standing nearby, was shocked and stepped in front of Joseph. "Let go. I can't teach someone else's daughter. My son can't be controlled today." Auntie's face turned cold as she raised her hand for another powerful slap, even louder than before. Joseph's face immediately swelled with blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. I stood there, never expecting Auntie to be so ruthless and harsh. Then I remembered how she had supported us by buying groceries and fish, raising Joseph alone, and funding his education by secretly selling her valuable jewelry. Joseph, being a filial son, didn't even dare wipe away the bloodstains, standing there in shock. Celine, feeling mistreated, pushed Joseph aside and confronted Auntie. "You're his mother, but I am his future wife. If you dare hit him today, tomorrow I'll send you to a nursing home." This declaration stunned everyone. Auntie pointed a trembling finger at Celine, but then clutched her chest, her face paling in extreme pain. "Mom!" She fainted from anger, drawing a crowd to the emergency room as red lights illuminated above. The birthday celebration had turned into chaos. Joseph slumped against the wall, too exhausted to sit on the floor. Celine, with smudged eye makeup, clung to his shoulder, softly sobbing, "Joseph? I didn't mean to..." The man remained silent, staring blankly at the blood-streaked floor. "Could you stop looking like that?" Celine, usually pampered and rarely apologetic, couldn't bear his cold response. She stood up angrily, grabbed her purse, and threw it at Joseph. "I did it because I was worried about you." "Get lost," Joseph replied softly. "What did you say?" Celine, tears streaming down her face, cried out, "Joseph, you can't treat me like this." Joseph suddenly stood up, ignoring the girl who had fallen after being hit. A nurse approached with documents needing a family member's signature. Joseph silently took the pen and signed the critical condition notice with trembling hands. I stood in a hallway corner, feeling a mix of emotions. Joseph was in the wrong, but his mother had supported us in our early entrepreneurial days by secretly selling her valuable jewelry to help us. She had entrusted it to me, telling me not to inform Joseph as he would never accept it. With that money invested, we faced failures and quickly hit rock bottom. She never blamed us, saying young people must dare to take risks, and that family would always support us. A warm coat covered my shoulders, carrying her lingering warmth. After the incident, Eric never left my side and remained consistently supportive. I leaned against him, feeling both physically and mentally drained. 6 hours later, the red light turned off and the doors opened. The surgery was successful, and Joseph was so emotional he nearly knelt. However, when he turned to share the good news, he saw Eric behind me and stopped abruptly. I removed Eric's coat, handing it back to him. "I just need to say a few words to him, and I'll be right back." "Okay." The strong wind on the hospital terrace made me regret not wearing Eric's coat when I left. Seeing me shiver from the cold, Joseph immediately took off his coat and offered it to me. I waved it off, but his eyes dimmed with disappointment. "Thank you for tonight." He was grateful I had called 911 immediately during the chaos and contacted the attending physician to rush me to the hospital. The doctor, familiar with Anne's heart condition, quickly communicated with the surgeon. Anne had always been kind to me. "It was only cruel to you." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I regret too much. 10 years ago, I knew you were my future wife, but being too young and wild, I couldn't resist external temptations. I wasn't satisfied at the time and succumbed to the outside world's allure. I consoled myself, thinking things would stabilize once I got married, but I was wrong. When I turned back, you were no longer where you had been before. I regret agreeing to let you go in the first place and watching another man take you away. Irene, I'm sorry for everything." He suddenly knelt, pulling a velvet box from his pocket and gently opening it. Inside lay the engagement ring I had dropped into my drink that day. "I've kept it all this while, hoping to put it back on you one day. Irene, can you come back to me?" All the starlight seemed to fall into his eyes as he spoke the words I had waited for 10 years to hear on that chilly midnight. I gently closed the box, lowering my gaze, and softly said, "Don't be foolish." He shook his head. "Joseph, we're not meant to be together in the end." Clutching the box tightly, he knelt on the ground with a bewildered expression. I patted his shoulder gently. "Please give Aunt my regards." As for the online misunderstandings, the author had already clarified them before my arrival. I had recordings of conversations with the director and character profiles I wrote for this IP, which I used when meeting the author. After being turned away twice, he finally opened the door the third time. After reviewing the materials, the author agreed to release a clarification statement on one condition. a change in the director. Even without mentioning it, I would have done the same. We quickly reached an agreement and even signed a letter of intent for future works. I attended the birthday banquet just to hear Joseph apologize. Suddenly, there was a muffled sound behind me. I turned to see Joseph clutching his stomach, collapsing to the ground with blood oozing through his fingers and spreading to my feet, holding a knife. Celine stood over him, crying and laughing simultaneously. "You never loved me. Why did you choose to be with me?" She looked up and smiled, then in agony, clutched her belly hysterically. "I loved you so much. Even when you called out someone else's name that drunken night, I tolerated it. How could you push me away today and then turn around to propose to this woman? Joseph, how can you justify our child and me?" My heart felt like it was about to explode. Holding my breath, my knees trembled uncontrollably as I stepped back. Celine turned around, her snow-white coat splattered with blood, looking terrifying. "It's all because of you." Suddenly, the knife rushed toward me, but a figure swiftly moved in front of me, kicking the bloody knife away. "Eric!" Fearful for his safety, I tried to pull him back, but he stood firm, acting like a wall to shield me. Soon, others rushed in and subdued the woman on the ground. She was pregnant. I whispered quietly, "Let's go home." As we entered the house, he pressed me against the door. "Eric?" The room was dark as he leaned over my shoulder, his hands tightly gripping my waist. I pushed the person on top of me, but he didn't budge. "It's heavy." "I'm fine," I comforted him by patting his back like a child. "I know," he muttered, not letting me see his face. "But I have something to tell you." I couldn't help but smile. "What's the matter?" "The second time you almost lost it in front of me, does the one by the river count?" It was clearly a misunderstanding on his part. Someone couldn't reason with him and resorted to violence directly. It's getting more and more out of hand. The surgery was very successful, and no one dared to tell her about the near-fatal stabbing incident involving her son. Joseph stayed in the ICU for a week before recovering somewhat, but his body was far from its former self. During this time, his company's biggest competitor somehow learned about his serious injury and hospitalization. They poached the core members of his team with high salaries, causing the leadership to scatter and the entire organization to collapse within weeks. All of this stemmed from John seeking refuge. Later investigations revealed that Celine was not pregnant. She had a drug addiction problem, and her mental issues had been evident for a long time. She had delusions of being pregnant. After Joseph's discharge, he swiftly dealt with the company's assets, dissolving what needed to be dissolved, compensating where necessary, and taking his mother abroad for treatment. Before leaving, he came to see me. That day, I had just returned from watching a movie with Eric, and we were debating the ending when Joseph called out to me. "I've changed my phone, you can't reach me at all." I said. He found out my address through various channels and had been waiting downstairs all day. "I'm flying tomorrow." Joseph was gone, his eyes completely devoid of their former sparkle. He wanted a cigarette, but his hands were shaking too much. I handed him the lighter and said softly, "Have a safe journey. Goodbye, Irene." He raised the cigarette in his hand and walked away. "Won't see you again," I said calmly. That familiar back seemed to have been stabbed in place by a knife. His shoulders trembled. His voice choked. "Won't see you again. You must be happy." When I returned home, I found a dazzling bouquet of sunflowers lying in front of the door, bright and radiant in the dim corner. Later, I received a message from Helen. She said her mother was gradually recovering and asked me not to worry. She never mentioned her brother. Helen understood me. She knew that if someone left, there was no need to complicate matters. The company endured the online storm and gradually got back on track. Mary discovered that the professor had been involved and felt deeply guilty for failing me, so she introduced me to a more capable director. The entire filming process went smoothly. Every day I heard the director praising Anna, eager to start a sequel immediately. Naturally, I wanted to properly reward my good friend. On the last day of filming, I invited the actress I had long admired, Louis, to the set, pretending to be a crew member and presenting flowers. Despite being a well-respected actress, she was usually indifferent, but seeing Louis made her cry like a young girl. The post-production of the TV series took time, and I finally had some time off. Eric had been planning a vacation for a while, and we finally scheduled it. It was March and April, with pleasant weather in Italy. We sat on a gondola, leisurely exploring the water city of Venice. During Eric's study abroad, he often traveled around Europe with his classmates, and this was his second visit to Venice. Along the way, he shared stories of the ancient buildings lining the riverside, tales from the streets of Venice, and interesting experiences from his study trips. A small boat approached us, and the girl on board with deep, bright eyes asked Eric if he wanted to buy a bouquet of flowers for his girlfriend. I immediately took out change from my pocket and bought all the flowers from her. "Flowers for the beauty," I said as I handed him the flowers. He took them, smiled, and then reached into the bouquet to pull out a silver ring. He carefully placed it on my finger. "The surprise I prepared was bought by you in advance," he said. "Let's get married." I twirled the silver ring on my finger. It fit perfectly, simply yet elegantly. Warmth spread through my heart, but I shook my head. "Eric, I'm not ready to get married yet." I slowly removed the ring, placed it back in his palm, and gently closed it. Looking back, I asked myself, how could I tolerate his repeated betrayals if the love was genuine? Perhaps we were too accustomed to each other's presence, but marriage shouldn't be based solely on habit. Eric clenched the ring tightly and said in a deep voice, "I am different from him." I held his neck, cradled his face, and softly replied, "Of course you have witnessed my 3 rebirths. I have new hopes for marriage, for the beauty of growing old together. Perhaps one clear morning in the future, waking up, I might realize that I love you. Maybe growing old slowly with this person wouldn't be a bad idea. Marriage is built on love and shouldn't be driven by numbers, age, or certain voices." The bridge was in sight, and it began to rain in Venice. "When will you give me a name?" someone asked grievously. His words amused me, and I chuckled. I wiped away the moisture from the corner of Eric's eyes, stood on tiptoe, and kissed his slightly cold lips. I whispered, "Like right now, I really want to take you home." A few deep chuckles escaped his throat, and he pulled me into his arms. He lowered his eyes and responded fiercely with action. "Don't just think about it.